Good morning. This is Monday morning, March 9th. And we are in Los Angeles. Tonight, we are to start our closed classwork here. But this morning, some of the members of that class have met in much the same way that we have done in the past year in other cities, having small groups of practitioners, teachers, workers in the message of the infinite way for informal talk, questions, answers, and any form of helpful activity that may unfold from the Father to us. It may well be that there are some here this morning who have not had active work, active experience in healing work or teaching, and I'm sure that they will derive some benefit from what takes place. But the greatest benefit will be to those who already have experience in some activity of truth work, and more especially some activity in the healing and teaching. Now, the most important part of all the work, so far as the infinite way is concerned, is the healing work. And you may wonder why that is, since the infinite way is not primarily a healing process or a method of healing sick bodies or sick people. Actually, in the infinite way, healing is just an added thing, something that takes place automatically as consciousness unfolds spiritually. But the reason that these morning sessions are devoted so much to actual healing work and meditation is that you can almost measure your spiritual understanding by the amount of healings that take place through your consciousness. Now, it may seem strange right here to say that you mustn't judge by whether or not you are getting healed. It's a strange thing that for a long time to come you may not get a healing yourself, or some one particular error may fasten itself to you and stay by with you for a long, long time to come. And you will wonder, how is this? Am I progressing? If I am progressing, why isn't it showing itself forth in my experience? Well, the answer is this. It would be as impossible for light to be admitted to this room and not dispel the darkness as for the light of truth to enter individual consciousness and not dispel the errors of sense. In other words, There are not two processes, the admitting of light and the expelling of darkness. The admitting of light is the expulsion of the darkness. And so the admitting of truth to consciousness is automatically appearing as harmony in the outer world. Ah, but you just said that some sin or disease or lack may still stick with me. Yes, and I'll repeat that. It may even intensify itself for a while, and there is a reason for that. And the reason is this. We are all in a transitional stage. We are all making the transition from a material state of consciousness to a spiritual one, which means that we are going from a state of consciousness that believes that money is supply to one that realizes that the consciousness of truth we entertain is supply, and money is the effect of it. In the same way, we are making the transition from the belief that the heart, liver, lungs, brain control or govern our lives, and that anything that would happen to our heart, liver, lungs, or brain would damage or destroy our lives. And we're going from that belief or state of material consciousness, physical consciousness, to the understanding that it is our life or consciousness of truth that governs the heart, liver, lungs, and brain. Well, now you can see that just having physical health is not the answer to your problem or mine. That having a state of physical health may, if anything, fool us into a sense of satisfaction with daily living that may eventually bar us from the kingdom of heaven. Why? Oh, it's so wonderful to have health and supply and say all is well and be very happy in it, not realizing that there are lots of people with no sense of God at all who have more health and more wealth than we have. Now, we will never be satisfied until we have come into the full consciousness of God as our health, which means then that even if they throw atomic bombs at us, they cannot affect our health, our body, our life, or being. Oh, I know that in the religious world they would say, oh, even if you die, you are immortal, your soul goes on. But I'm not speaking of that sense of immortality. I'm speaking of the sense of immortality as we understand it in spiritual wisdom. The sense of immortality that says nothing can affect my life, mind, being, or body, since only the consciousness of truth is the substance, law, cause, and effect of all being. And so you see that we may, with the light of truth that we've gained, we may bring a great deal of benefit into our experience, and much more benefit into the experience of our friends, relatives, neighbors, patients, and students, and we may still walk around with a thorn in the flesh for a while. We may still walk around with some form of physical or financial discord, and we must not desire to see it go until it goes through spiritual wisdom. Many people have said to me, you know, those eyeglasses aren't becoming on you on a platform talking about spiritual truth. Why don't you have the Bates method, just remove them from you? And I said, then what would be the difference? I'd just be the same man without eyeglasses as I am with eyeglasses. Nothing would have been achieved except the glasses taken off. No, and then I said, in addition to that, I'd be a liar. So many people would be saying, now you see, he made the demonstration through God. That wouldn't be true. No, I'm going to let them stay there until through an elevation of consciousness, Spirit removes them. And so it is with any discord, any inharmony. I have been through in years past a sense of financial lack, but I did not try to remedy the situation by asking people for money or telling them they ought to be grateful or ought to pay me or borrowing it, for the simple reason that that would not have met my need. I have embarked on a spiritual path, not one of attaining material good. And I'm not ashamed of having a cold or any other physical discord. I'm not ashamed of lack or limitation if it is part of my experience. I'm not a metaphysician who says you can tell how much spiritual understanding I have by how many homes or automobiles I've got, or I can afford a yacht. That is not the sign of spiritual unfoldment. But with spiritual unfoldment does come economic freedom, and abundantly too, and the freedom of body abundantly too. But if we do have a discord here or there, let's not be ashamed of it. I don't mean boast of it either, but let's not be ashamed of it. I don't discuss this outside of a class of this kind, but all cards are on the table here. I'm giving you everything I know for your benefit, and not merely for yours, but for the benefit of those who will touch your consciousness. Now then, a sense of physical or mental or financial discord at the present time is no sin. It really just represents that phase of our lack of transition. And there's no disgrace to that. The way is straight and narrow, and few there be that enter. Now, we are the few who are seeking to enter, and in some measure, all of us have entered, and we're going to keep on until we make the grand entry. But while we're doing it, do not condemn yourself or another for some lack of demonstration. Remember, they may have gone 99% further than you or I in some ways that are not visible to us, and that we would gladly exchange for what we have progressed in. I know that that is very, very true, that there are modes and means of spiritual development and unfoldment that go far beyond any immediate sense of merely health and wealth. So let us take our own demonstration in stride and imbibe all of the truth that we possibly can. Learn it all, study it all, listen to it all, read it all, ponder, meditate, and let it fulfill itself. And if at the moment we are able to help others more than ourselves, they said the same thing of the Master. Others he could save, but not himself. In the end, but not if we indulge condemnation or criticism of ourselves or others, not if we permit a sense of frustration to enter on the path. Please let it be understood that we have at the very best only attained 1 grain of spiritual awareness, and just go to any ocean front and see how small 1 grain is, and you'll know how much further we have to go. And I make no exceptions to that. I know nothing about whether or not Lao Tse or Buddha or Jesus Christ attained all they're credited with having attained in the complete fulfillment, but those that we have come personally close to those of our own era whom we have known or met or heard about, none so far have attained the supreme demonstration of complete oneness while yet tabernacling in the flesh. Yes, it is possible that at a moment of transition, even what the world may call death, passing on, that one may attain, may step right from this lack of completeness into the full awareness. But so far, we have nobody on earth, not certainly in this generation or the last one, ready to claim that they have attained the fullness. Now let this be understood. The fullness has been attained in momentary glimpses. There are many on earth at this very moment who have attained the full and complete realization and revelation of Christhood in momentary flashes of meditation, inspiration, initiation. But they cannot walk the face of the earth, or at least are not walking the face of the earth, in the complete sense of Christ's attainment. All of this really means stop depreciating yourself. Stop criticizing. Stop condemning yourself. If you attain that, you will attain the second, of loving your neighbor as yourself. In other words, you will no longer criticize, judge, or condemn your neighbor's lack of demonstration. But first, overcome the mastery and give up all sense of rebellion, frustration, doubt. And that leads naturally to this. We think we know what spiritual demonstration consists of. We think we know what we would like. And one of the things is that everyone who comes to us for help should have an instantaneous healing. I don't know of a practitioner who hasn't that dream or hasn't had that dream. I don't have it anymore, because I have seen so many instantaneous healings where nothing happened to the individual except the greater sense of freedom to go back and sin again. You know, that was one of the lessons of the Master. He healed the 10. No, he healed plenty. But on occasion he said, go and sin no more. And you know, I noticed this in the work. Many of our people, students, believe that if they once attain a certain degree of consciousness, that they never again can lose it. Don't you ever believe that? You can become as good a practitioner as there is on the face of the earth and as good a teacher, and you can attain heights of spiritual demonstration beyond your belief and end up in the gutter. And if you doubt it, it only represents your lack of experience in this work. It just as it takes great effort for any man or woman in life to attain success, it embodies greater attainments to retain that success. Every champion has found that it was easier to get to be a champion than to continue to be one. Every person who has achieved name, reputation, fame, has found it more difficult to hold on to that than to get it in the beginning, right? Yes. Yes, there isn't any question about it. The moment that you attain success, the next question is,
Can I do it over again tomorrow? Will my work tomorrow be as good as today? It is no different in this spiritual activity. The mesmerism of the world is terrific. And a person may go on to spiritual success and then find themselves up against 1,000 temptations. Somewhere the Master tells of a healing, making room for 7 more to enter. One devil going out, making room for 7 more to enter. We get cleaned out of 7 devils sometimes to make room for 70 to come in. Now, we don't speak of this ordinarily in our work. It isn't in the writing. But I'm telling it to you here that every gain in spiritual understanding must be retained by as hard a work as it was to attain it, or more so. Every day brings temptations to rest either in material health or material wealth, or to rest on one's oars, or to now indulge some of the things that we didn't have time or money for before, or to accept the adulation of the world. Oh, the temptation to accept banquets and medals. Well, you say, that would not tempt me. And probably not. It hasn't tempted me, but other things have. So who knows what it is that will tempt you. The temptations are there. Whether or not we give in to them, that depends upon the degree of our watchfulness. Watch. Isn't it on the Christian Science Sentinel? Watch, work and pray somewhere. Yes, watch, work and pray, because every gain must be held on to. For every spiritual gain, there are 2 temptations lying in wait to snatch them from us. It has been one of the sources of sadness in my experience in the Infinite Way work to see some students make rapid headway, wonderful headway, and do some fine things, and then very quickly fall by the wayside. Reminds me a great deal of the Master's teaching of the planting of the seeds, and some of it does take root and spring up, but it doesn't last long. I've seen that. I've seen people seem to gain a wonderful understanding of truth and go out and have some nice healings too, and then very soon fall by the wayside with one of these temptations of sense or another. And there's so many that there would be no use now of rehearsing all of them. Now, in our work, we have need to watch one word. One word can make us or break us. One word alone can not only set us on the path, it does set us on the path. Rightly understood, it will keep us there. If we're not careful, it will unseat us. And that word is the word I. Now watch it. Watch it. If I may illustrate it this way, we speak of Jesus multiplying loaves and fishes. Never believe for a moment that it happened. Never believe it. The Christ multiplied loaves and fishes, and Jesus stood by probably with amazement and watched it take place. Moses opened the Red Sea. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. The Christ did. And Moses was the vehicle of it. Had Moses ever put the word I in there, it would have been his undoing, or Jesus. It was only Jesus' complete understanding of the fact that I can of my own self do nothing, that my doctrine is not mine, that I bear witness only to the Father. Only that made him what we call the Savior, the Messiah. Had he for a moment thought that he was endowed with spiritual power, he would have been lost. And anyone today who believes that they are endowed with spiritual power will be lost. Nobody is endowed with spiritual power. God alone is spirit, and God alone is spiritual power. And the best that we can do is become, through non-action, through non-I, the not-I, the instrument for its activity. I could illustrate that in an experience that happened recently. A man came to me on this trip for help on a physical problem. It had had a good deal of work and a good deal of experienced work, and hadn't yielded. And he said, will you, during the class this week, give some thought to this and help me? And I said, yes. On the second night following, he awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was standing at the foot of his bed and said to him, now you see the nothingness of physical disease. Stop this nonsense. And instantly the pain stopped and he was healed. Now then, do you think that I was conscious of any of that? Speaking of Joel, do you think Joel knew that that took place? No, Joel probably was either fast asleep at 3 o'clock or was sitting meditating. But he certainly was not walking around in other people's bedrooms. He had no conscious awareness. Yes, we had this experience in Seattle something over a year ago. A young lady, also experienced in this work, asked to meditate with me. And we had, I think, 3 periods of meditation. And one morning she awakened at 4 o'clock and I was sitting on her bed talking to her. And she looked up and said, oh, I don't want Joel, I want God. And the answer came, what is the difference? What was the difference? There wasn't any difference because it wasn't Joel there consciously. Joel knew nothing about that. That was God expressing itself in the way necessary at that moment. And heaven help Joel if he thought he could do it or tried to do it for you. Do you understand that? Never believe that I, as an individual, and many in our work have had similar experiences to this, many for many years past have had experiences with me of this kind, but never once have I consciously known that it was happening. Never was I, Joel, consciously responsible for it. Then you say, how did it happen? It happened because of non-I. It happened because Joel sat in meditation with God, with no thought of you or where you were or what your need was. You had turned to Joel, knowing that Joel had enough awareness of this thing not to think that he was a healer. And so you weren't turning to Joel, you were really turning to the God consciousness manifested as Joel. And very fortunately, Joel had sense enough to know that if the master could do nothing of himself, that Joel could do less. And so Joel's part was meditation, a conscious union with God, a frequent sitting in communion with God, pondering the great truth of God and God's universe, and then because of your tuning in to that consciousness, which was not Joel but God, God appeared to you in the form that you could understand, and in many cases met the need. Not Joel, God, acting as the consciousness of Joel. Now, the word I would wreck this work. The moment I would say, I can do this, or you can do it. I can't, and you can't. The one thing we can do, and this is really the secret. I'm going back now to the very beginning of all my work. And that was, first, the 2 or 3 experiences that I had with my mother when I knew nothing about metaphysics, never had heard the term, didn't even know the term Christian Science then, didn't know there was such a thing. But in her headaches, I would say, Mom, I can help you. And in a few moments, she had some freedom. It only happened a few times. It never was a cure, never was a healing agency, but there was some measure of relief. But I don't know how, nor do I know what impelled me to make such a statement. Then, after the experience in 1928, in which I was lifted out of the material sense, from then on, healings began to take place automatically whenever people asked for it. But I had no process and no treatment. I knew only one thing, to sit quietly, wait until that touch came, that sense of awareness of the presence, and the healing took place. Never ask me how. I do not know, any more than I know now. No one knows how healings take place. All I know is that as this quietness, this gentleness, this peace descends, in some way the healing takes place. Therefore, my function, as I learned then, and I've never had reason to change it, my experience is that the conscious communion with God, the touch of God in our consciousness, is the healing agency. Therefore, our function is merely attaining that oneness, attaining that consciousness of God's presence, and then letting it do the work. Now, you might say, then, what about all of this treatment that we have whole chapters on in the writing? That plays its part in preventing us from having a blind faith. That prevents us from going off onto emotional tangents and ignorance of the truth of being. Now, in those days, my earliest days in the healing work, I had no knowledge of this truth of being. And therefore, I do not know how long that healing work would have continued, because it was a continuous puzzle to me and a state of uncertainty, because I didn't know the nature of it. It was only one day when the realization dawned, oh, error isn't a reality, that I caught a glimpse of how it could happen, that it wasn't the power of God doing something to an error. It was the power of God revealing that there was no error. That gave me then the basis of the letter of truth. That gave me then an understanding of what was taking place. It wasn't God being gracious to me and healing through me. It wasn't God doing something through me that it wouldn't do through anyone else. It wasn't God doing something for one patient that it wouldn't do for another patient. Oh, it had nothing to do with anything like that. It was the fact that as human beings, we haven't got a God. As human beings, we are separate and apart from God. As human beings, we are completely outside of God's control, not under God's law, and anything can happen. Step into a bathtub and break your neck, or go out on the street and get hit with an automobile or anything else, and God cares nothing about it. Wars, atomic bombs, what does God care? Why? A human being isn't in contact with God. And the law of God and the reign of God isn't touching a human being. Only do we come under the grace of God when we have made God contact. And then it isn't that God is overcoming sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation, or preventing accidents. It is that we are in a state of consciousness where those things cannot and do not happen, where sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation have no existence. Now there is the entire secret of spiritual living. Unless you can give up the theological belief in a God who will answer prayer, a God who will come down to meet some human need, a God who is sitting somewhere, even within you, withholding it until you arrive at the right prayer or the right practitioner, that must be given up. Or until you learn the right combination of words. All of that superstitious theological teaching about God must be given up for the truth. What truth? That your conscious communion with God lifts you into a state of consciousness where materiality does not reign, where there are no laws of matter. Did you ever stop to realize any healing that you've ever experienced, of your own or another's, has been a proof that there are no laws of matter? Let us take a simple cold, which is based on the belief of germs. Every cold is based on the germ theory, I believe. There's a germ that passes from one to another, a germ that we contract or contact, and it gets into our system and does something to it, thereby proving a law of matter. But now you go to a metaphysician who never touches a piece of matter, who doesn't have to come within 3,000 miles of your physical self, and the cold disappears. Where is that law of matter? Can a law be overcome? No. Nobody can overcome a law. There's a law of like begetting like. Roses come from roses, peaches from peaches, white from white, black from black. Can you overcome it? No. Can you set it aside? Can you have an exception to it to prove the rule? No. 2 times 2 or 4, you can't have it ever come 5 or 3. There's no such thing as an exception to a rule, nor is there such a thing as a violation, of a law, nor is there such a thing as a violation of a law or the setting aside of a law. And so, if the germ theory were a law, no Christian Science treatment or unity treatment or infinite way treatment or even mental treatment would ever stop that law from operating. Now every law, every healing then is a proof that there is no such thing as a law of matter. But you say, look at the hospitals, look at the cemeteries. Certainly they are living witnesses to the power of a belief of material law, that is, of a consciousness apart from God. Because all of those things are happening in this state of consciousness which is called material or human. Is it happening in God consciousness? No. No. Does it happen to anyone who is in God consciousness? No. Do practitioners get the diseases of their patients?
No. Do practitioners have to wash in alcohol and perfume themselves with antisepticides and all the rest of these things? No. No. Why? Because there is no such thing as physical contamination, because there are no laws of matter. Now, I do believe that metaphysicians, because the first approach to this work was the mental, actually accepted the belief that although there was no physical contamination, there was mental contamination. And so they began to fear certain types of thought, fearing that the thought of one person, a bad thought, an evil thought, a revengeful thought, or a sensual thought, could pass from one individual to another. They'd already overcome the belief that diseases couldn't pass from one to another physically, but they could mentally. Well, now let's come up a step higher than that and understand that the mental and the physical states of consciousness are merely two levels of the same consciousness. And whatever would apply in the material realm applies in the mental. If there are no laws of contamination in the material realm, there are none mental, because they're the same realm. Now, of course, in the spiritual realm, there is a law of contamination. You're always being contaminated by God with qualities of God and activities of God, and these are contagious. They'll spread right in this room from one to another so fast you'll be surprised how we'll all go out of here contaminated with God qualities. Yes, only we won't call it contamination, we'll call it what? Grace. The love of God, the gift of God. But please understand that we must begin somewhere in the letter of truth, so that if we have the spirit of truth first, the letter of truth will at least give us something on which to base ourselves so as not to go off into blind alleys. Or if we haven't the measure of the spirit of truth, we can develop it through the awareness of the letter of truth. Let us explain that. If you only take this one point, that there are no laws of matter, just this one point, we'll have it in class during the evening sessions. One point, there are no laws of matter. You know what that means? It really means that there are no laws of two things occupying the same place, so there are no laws of accident. There are no laws of matter. That is, so-called laws of matter aren't law, they're beliefs. And a belief will never hurt anyone that isn't a believer. You have to believe a belief in order to suffer from it. If you don't believe it, it can't touch you. Now then, that one point entertained over a period of days or weeks or months will result in such a change of consciousness that every time some claim, appearance, or belief of law, material law, comes, automatically it will be dispelled like light dispels darkness. That's what I mean by, in our classwork, you'll hear much about the activity of truth and consciousness. Now this is what I mean by activity of truth and consciousness. You take one point, only carry it further than I did. You search your thought and see all, or see how many laws of matter that you're aware of, and that you've believed were actual laws. Oh, people have hay fever because of flowers. The rest of us get joy because of flowers. Is there a law of matter in that case? No. But try to tell that to the hay fever sufferer. Can't be done. In the same way with asthma, same way with tuberculosis, same way with cancer. Why, cancer is the belief of laws, certain laws of matter, cellular laws. But if they were laws, a cancer would never be healed through this work. they are healed. Someday they all will be healed through it. One point like that, entertained and thought, that particular activity of truth in consciousness will develop the spirit or consciousness of truth, so that many times, without a conscious thought, a law of matter will be brought to your attention and dispelled, sometimes without your doing anything consciously about it. The mere fact that you are in that higher consciousness that recognizes, gives no honor to laws of matter, dispels it. That is why many of our good workers now have come to the place where it is not necessary for them to give a treatment, because their consciousness is so imbued with these truths that very little in the way of treatment, and often nothing in the way of treatment, is necessary to dispel the illusory sense. Also, this will explain now to some of you who have perhaps tried to practice without success, or have not had the success in practice to which you're entitled. This may explain it to you. You can't have any greater healing success than your consciousness of truth. And so, if you haven't a clear assurance of the truth, that there are no laws of matter, if you haven't attained some measure of consciousness of that, don't expect too much in the way of healing. In other words, even to go out of here with the statement there are no laws of matter may not result immediately in healing works. You may have them at once, and then you may have them disappear in a week or two or three. It'll be up to you whether or not you take a point like this and hold to it on every occasion until it becomes a spiritual law. This truth becomes a spiritual law within your being. I mentioned yesterday this idea of these two men who had been healed of at least the acute sense of intoxication by these two girls knowing the truth. Now you see, there was a specific truth in consciousness, and reciting the fact that matter is not a law won't stop alcohol from intoxicating one. But living and moving with this truth will develop a state of consciousness, and ultimately intoxication will have no place and no presence, no power in your presence. And no one will be able to indulge any great degree of alcoholism, if any, in your presence. If your consciousness becomes imbued with the truth that there are no laws of matter. Do you see that point? Now, however, you must carry that to see what the laws are that tell about the power of alcohol, the power of infection, the power of contagion, the power of accident. These are all laws of matter. And think of all the cases that you know where laws of matter are holding people in bondage to sin, disease, death, old age, lack, and limitation. Why, every appearance of age is nothing more or less than a belief that matter has a law, and the law is deterioration in time. Do you see that? But now one point like that can change a person's entire life. Grasping, understanding one point like that can change not only their lives, but the lives of all who touch them. But you can see now why I say that it is not given to everybody who studies truth to be a good practitioner. But it's for this reason. There are certain specific truth that must be known, but not merely intellectually known, understood, repeated, affirmed, declared, until they become embodied in consciousness. I don't mean used like affirmations in the usual metaphysical teaching, but I mean every time that you go on the street and behold some form of deformity, sin, disease, error, consciousness must be alert. There are no laws of matter. Laws of matter aren't laws but beliefs, and they aren't power. God is the only power. And that must be done consciously 10, 20, 30, 50 times a day, every time you witness a form of discord on the street, in your household, wherever you may be. The activity of truth in your consciousness is the secret. But how active is truth in your consciousness? How much alive can you make it? And this allows, you see, no time or space for an hour of gossip at tea time. You can't do this 1 hour a day and go back to human thinking 8 hours a day. You can't do this even 8 hours a day and go back to human thinking 16 hours a day. This has to be a rigid code of acceptance. I accept that matter is our law and has no law. And then 24 hours a day refute every appearance of a law of matter until it becomes so imbued in consciousness that just walking down the street dispels these erroneous appearances. Do you see that? The same thing is true in our work. Many, many people come to this work, and you'd be surprised how many of them discover in a few weeks or a few months that now they know all the truth there is. Know as much as teacher does. You don't need teacher anymore. It seems to become a matter of pride to say, well, I don't need a teacher anymore. I don't know how they get that way. Years and years and years must be devoted to the development of consciousness. If one has to do it alone, it can be done. If one can have the benefit of practitioner or teacher to help them, it's a most wonderful help and a time saver on the way. Believe me, doing it alone is the hard way and the long way. Just as doing it with those who have not attained the spiritual consciousness is another tough method. But find a practitioner or find a teacher who has through their lives shown forth the fruitage of their spiritual understanding, and stick with them until you know you can walk on the waters. There's no disgrace in being taught. That's just one of our American get-rich-quick ideas, that we don't need our banker and we don't need our mother and father very long and we don't need our teacher very long. We can always do it ourselves so much better and in a hurry, too. Hasn't worked so well in the past, so let's be a little more patient. Do you see how these sessions fill a need that the regular classwork doesn't do? And as Al Jolson used to say, you haven't even seen anything yet. I spoke of that false sense of I. When you learn to sit back and commune with the Father, and you get this first awareness of the presence, you will very quickly know that I of my own self can do nothing. And you will know then why you must watch the word I that will at some time or other try to convince you that it was your understanding or your spirituality or your goodness or your living the life or your sacrifice of material things that brought it about. Don't ever believe it. God brought it about. It may be true that you would never have had your God contact but for these other things, but you can't even take credit for those, since it was God that brought you to the sacrifice of material things. It was God that kept your nose to the grindstone. It was God that sends you chasing all over the United States, Africa, and India, or where not, for instruction. It is God that makes you pick up your baggage and say, let's go here, there, and the other place. It's God that holds you to your books hours a day, or to recordings hours a day. It isn't you. And it isn't your desire for God. It's God's presence breaking through. So in no wise use the word I. In no wise believe that any spirituality on your part, or any abstaining from coffee or tea or meat or sex, that's going to do it. No, no, no. When the Spirit comes through, it may take some of those things from you. If it does, fine, you'll never miss them. If it doesn't, Spirit cannot be obstructed in its work. So don't think that your cup of coffee or tea or your piece of meat is going to stop God operating. No. God cannot be hindered in its operation. All you are called on to do is make your contact. Make it. And then let God dispel both for you and for your patient and for your student whatever is unnecessary in their experience at that particular time. Always remember, we can live without meat. We can. But it's very difficult until the spiritual sense has taken over. In other words, while we are living in a sense of the physical body, we require not only air, but fresh air. And I doubt that any of us are ready to say that we would do too well without air or without fresh air. And so it is that our mode of living has attuned our bodies to certain demands. And those demands, especially in our country, take the form of a need for meats. Now then, we do not live by bread alone. The word alone is in there. We do not live by meat alone, but for a while we require meat. Now then, as the Spirit takes over, it eliminates that. And people can go forever without meat, or for months, or for years without it, with no injurious effect. But why? Because the Spirit is doing that which formerly was the function of meat. And so it is. It is said in Scripture that death is the last enemy that shall be overcome. And I ask you to believe, not merely for your own sakes, but for your patients and your students, please believe that sex is the next to the last enemy that will be overcome, if it is an enemy. And if it is overcome, it will be overcome not by repression or suppression. It will be overcome by the activity of the Spirit taking its place, and in no other way. And so, whatever our human sense of goodness may embody, whatever our human sense of rightness may be, please remember this. Let the Spirit bring about the necessary correction. Then, when the Spirit does it, and how do we let the Spirit do it? Through this inner communication or communion or oneness or attunement with God. As we more and more feel that flow of the Spirit, we lose the sense of outer needs, outer entertainment, outer toys of any nature, outer joys, outer things. The inner fulfills in every case. And so, when you're dealing with your patients, when you're dealing with your students, do not try to correct them humanly. Do not try to make them better humans. Give them the Spirit of truth. Give them the benefit of meditation and communion, and let the Spirit do the correcting and the improving and the healing and the reforming. Is that clear? Sometimes you're apt to tell them what your demonstration is, and they try to make it like Peter tried to make the Master's demonstration of walking on the water, and they may not make it, and you may not be standing by to save them. So do not try to make the demonstration for your patient or student. Rather, leave them in their error for a while you support them spiritually until the Spirit takes over. And then you'll have a person not merely who has become a good human, you'll have a person who has become fed, maintained, and sustained by the Spirit. Well, isn't that a lot of fun? For tonight, anyhow. Thank you.